My name is Tammi Ginsberg. I lost my brother Brian to suicide in 1988. We knew my brother was struggling. He had been in and out of hospitals. He was 23 years old. He would check himself out every time. And remember, this was before cell phones and computers and all of those things. So a lot of times we didn't really even know where he was. I remember my father just hysterical, just couldn't even leave his bed. And it was so scary to me because I had never seen him that way. And we didn't talk about it at all. Nobody suggested therapy. Nobody even talked about my brother anymore. And it wasn't because he wasn't loved, it was because it was so painful. I thought for sure with my father, if I brought it up, I was doing damage. I was doing more damage to him, not really being able to process at that young age that, he was grieving every day as I was, and that maybe it could have been helpful to talk about it, but we never did. The only time I would bring it up to my dad, we would always call each other on the anniversary of his death and again on his birthday. And all we would say was, "How are you doing today?" In like that weird tone where you're talking about something, but you don't really want to say what it is. And then we would say, "Oh, yeah, whatever." And he was somebody who liked to go to the cemetery. So he would say that he went to the cemetery, but we wouldn't talk about him. We wouldn't say, "Do you remember when?" And, "Oh, I miss him." And can nothing like that. It was really just tiptoeing, very, very tiptoeing. There was also at that time an embarrassment around the fact that it was a suicide. So, everybody knew that he died, and truly everybody knew he died by suicide. But we didn't talk about that either because there was such a huge stigma around it at the time. Not to say that there isn't still, but we've done some work. We're better. We're better at normalizing it as a mental health issue as opposed to some sort of failure on the part of the person or the family. When I started to struggle with my own mental health was when I finally got help, was when I finally went to therapy and started to have a better understanding of my relationship to his death. It wasn't my fault. It took that long because he took his life the day before my birthday. I truly thought that it was aimed at me somehow. And until I started to talk about it with other people and understood not how somebody who is suicidal is thinking at all, did I start to understand that any way I grieved was quote unquote normal. It changed because it wasn't a secret anymore. I wasn't embarrassed about it anymore. I mean, my whole life, I was a very private person about everything. Very, very private. I just felt like I was the only one, a lot of things in my life, like nobody would understand. So this was just one more piece to that puzzle that I felt like I don't want to talk about. And when I overcame my own depression, when I started to heal, I realized that the greatest gift I could give was to help other people in this way. And the best way that I thought I could do it was to become a therapist. In school, I had to really work through my grief because when you go back to school to be a counselor, you got to deal with your own stuff. So I talked about it there. I talked about it with friends. I talked about it lots of places. And it started to feel more like I'm not alone. Some people understand, some people don't. And those that don't, there's nothing wrong with that. That's their experience. They don't know from it, which is great. But I'm here to educate because suicide touches everybody to some degree at some point in their life. And if they know they're not alone and they know that there's someone they can talk to that will not make them feel like they're going through something that other people aren't going through, then you're giving them the greatest gift that you can. And I continue to, by the way, it's been 30 something years. Grief, there is no end. It's a journey. There is no destination. So there are still things that activate me. There are still times when I see things that kind of, get me into my grief again. But instead of judging myself and saying, "Oh, you should be over that. What's wrong with you? Why are you still after all this time?" I love myself through it. I accept myself through it. My relationship with my grief, we're friends now. You know, we avoided each other for a really long time. I don't want to go anywhere near that grief person. But now we're hand in hand. We're friends. We're one. And when grief needs to give me a message or to show up for whatever reason, I invite grief in and say, come on, sit down at the table with me. Let's talk. Let's talk about what we need to talk about.